Dr. L. Kopichandran, Professor, College of Nursing. Sir's topic is current trends in management of headache. Sir, please, screen is over to you.
Thank you, Anjali, for your invitation and having my presentation over here.
First of all, we have to thank you, sir.
No.
Okay.
This is my topic today on trends in headache management. Even though I have presented in many platforms, but still it's a need of the hour to talk about this headache management. We know that headache is one, as per the evidences, it is underdiagnosed, undertreated. Even though it's the disease very simple, we come to know that even we self-treat ourselves whenever we have the headache problem, but still underdiagnosed, undertreated. That we come to know when I'm just talking about headache management. So today my focus on how the holistic management of headache, how help the patient to reduce the disability and also improve the quality of life. Ultimately, everyone want to achieve the quality of life. This is what the clinical outcome we expected as physician or any health worker. We talk about the headache is a pain in the head in the pain, being above the eyes or ears or behind the head or occipital or back of the upper neck. Again, it's classified into primary versus secondary as the nature of the disease or origin of the disease, or focal or generalized as areas involved, and acute and versus chronic according to the duration of the headache. When we talk about the international classifications, the headache is again the primary headache. Under the primary headache, we can say migraine, tension type headache, or cluster headache, or we can say cuff headache or hemicranias continua. Again, secondary headache, we know the headache caused by another diagnosis that like post-traumatic or vascular disease or other intracranial pathology or substances, CNS infection or homeostatic disorder like hypertension, hypoxia, cervicogenic, ocular, sinus as per the origin of the disease, again, psychiatric. So when you talk about the headache type, there is a 4 common type I can say. There is many types are there. That again, we can say sinus origin, again tension type, again migraine and cluster. How do you differentiate between these 4 types? The sinus, depending upon again the area involved or patient report the pain behind the brow bone or cheekbones. Cluster pain is in and around the one eye. The tension type is like a band squeezing at the head, and migraine is the characterized by pain is associated with nausea and visual changes as a typical classical form. When you talk about the migraine headache, as per the symptoms, characteristics, pain in the face or neck, throbbing in one area, sensitivity to light and sound, nausea and distorted visions. The duration of the headache is minimum 4 hours to 72 hours. And it's under the primary category. The tension type headache, it's a dull pain or either side of the head or pressure across the forehead. The duration of the pain, 30 minutes to several hours, again is under primary category. The sinus headache, it's a pain in the face, sinuses, eyes, ears or forehead, congestion, itching, running nose, fever, swelling in the face. Again, the duration is several days to the weeks if treated. Again, is under secondary category. The cluster headache, the severe pain on one side of the head, usually around the eye, accompanied with the drooping eyelid, small pupil, tearing, running nose, or redness of the same side of the head. The duration, it is can last for weeks or several months, usually followed by the period of remission that can last for several months to several years. It is under primary category. Today, my focus, because I had done the doctoral work, Dr. Achal Srivatsa at the AIIMS, we have recruited almost 169 patients who are under, diagnosed as chronic tension headache. So that's why it is most of my talk on today about tension type and chronic tension type and how holistically we managed that improve the outcome of the patients. So almost with the tension type and migraine, almost similar as per the symptoms, how it still can be differentiated, how it is associated with the vomiting or any sensory issues, then we can come to differentiate between the tension type and migraine. So it is actually tension type headache is generally a diffuse, mild to moderate pain in your headache that often described as feeling like tight band around the head. Already I was given the clarifications. Again, you can say that it's under psychogenic headache, stress headache, ordinary headache, or essential headache, even if we can call it as idiopathic headache. So it is mostly we say that because due to lifestyle changes, we get into stress. Stress may trigger into the patient may suffer with this tension of headache. That's why the lifestyle changes is one of the major one which we consider that it's cause for the tension of headache. It's again the tension of headache classified under infrequent according to the number of episodes, like one or few episodes per month. Again, frequent tension of headache is more than one, or we can say less than 15 days per month. For almost minimum should be 3 months the patient may reported for that. Again, chronic tension of headache, it's more than 15 days per month. Again, we consider the patient have the duration, it's a minimum for 3 months. They reported under the frequent headache, chronic tension of headache. The chronic tension of again, it's defined by International Headache Society. It is the occurrence of bilateral tension of headache at a frequency of more than 15 days per month with pressing and tightening quality, mild to moderate intensity as a nature, lasting hours to day or unremitting or not worsening with the routine physical activity, but may be associated with the mild nausea, photophobia, and phonophobia. Again, I'm repeating that. So it is not worsening with the routine physical activity. Again, that migraine is one worsening with the routine physical. This is way to differentiate by your history, and also that patient, when you do examination, also the patient may they say that is the tension, that's a band type construction, or maybe there's a tightening quality. That may be the one of the characteristics we can define that, or maybe we can diagnose that the patient is having tension type headache. Again, the incidence very common today due to same all country, like developing country, the people are with under stress. They may that disease has become now more affecting. It's almost to be 0.5 to 4.8% of the worldwide population. Almost we can say 20%, 23% in general population, they're contributing significantly to the disease burden today. So male and female ratio is 4:5, but it's very rare with the people 12 to 14 years old. But again, the prevalence of the chronic tension headache is increases until age 39, but decline to the both sexes today. Is as per my study, I cannot conclude, but still as per 169, it's still better sample to say that majorly the patient have moderate in nature of the headache severity. Again, you can see majorly they are reported 5 episodes per week. Again, a duration of this headache for the tension type headache, chronic tension type, almost be the 8 hours per day. Already I have almost 3 paper I published on this work. One of the paper I already report on sleep quality in patient chronic tension headache, a report from tertiary care facilities, that almost they are all reported it's fairly bad in nature of that. Even equally, I can say very bad in nature of the sleep quality. And again, most of them are having that sleep medication, but we are compared with the patient who are taking more than thrice a week, but most of them have less than once a week. They are having the sleep medication to for their better sleep. Then everyone understand out they are the ones suffering with the sleep problem, all due to again anxiety and stress. This is very common nature today in the society, but this all ended, or maybe we can say a patient are ended with this the disease, which is not be even the patient start with pharmacological management, still they required a relaxation or many other holistic approach to improve their outcome and also reduce the pain. So the all today the matter of health is not only to physically to improve the holistic manner. So again, general practice point to the management of primary headache. We know all that. Rule out a secondary headache when diagnosing the primary headache. What we do today as per the practice, early we simply ignore the headache, but they start to look into the headache, how the magnitude of the problem and how it worsening into the patient, the very bad impact on that in terms of the quality of life and the poor clinical outcomes. Again, neuroimaging is not indicated every patient unless until some lesion or some other impact on secondary headache. But again, we must know if there is patient is completely you tested the neuroimaging is it's not indicating anything, or again normal neurological examinations, we can go into that how patient may with according to history we can differentiate between migraine and tension type headache. Again, migraine, we already, I just pointed out that this is the patient with the previous diagnosis of recurring any sinus headache. That way also we can refer over there. Again, sometimes the patient may have the headache due to medication overuse. That also we need the history collect about what type of medication history. Again, we have to talk, we have to rule out that the comprehensive, and also to think about that how the comprehensive migration therapy, what I earlier mentioned, like lifestyle changes, and again, that acute and prophylactic medication, that also improve the patient with the migraine or tension headache. I think this is the most important things to understand by nurses, especially because they are the one to the first patient contact, and either in the community level or maybe at your family level, or it may be at the OPD level. When you when you start to collect the history from the patient who are suffering with any kind of headache, we must collect the history on headache onset, and again pain locations, and again headache associated symptoms, and the relationship of headache attack related to what are the triggering factors, we can say, or stress or posture, cough, exertion, staining, neck movements, and any type of the severity and effect on work. Is it associated with their work or any family activity? That's the most important question. Make the differentiation between the migraine and the headache or tension type or other headaches. Again, acute and preventive medications, whatever they tried, what is their response, and again side effect. Every patient respond to the medication different way. So we must also, most important, to collect about it. And also some of them may have some other side effect that also to be collect for the further management. Again, the presence of coexistent conditions might influence the treatment choice. That also need to be on the patient with a history of insomnia or depression, anxiety, hypertension, asthma. Especially a patient, we may look into the beta blockers to take consideration, because it's one of the therapy, first line therapy for the patient who are with the tension type. We should know that patient have history of asthma. That is one of the one to help us to know whether we can start the patient, the therapies we can start with the patient or not. Again, any heart disease and stroke, we know that the patients who are taking any medication that may have effect on that any like vital organ like heart, and so we have to know that if the patient will be contraindicated the medication or not. So again, the patients, I published some of the works which also help to know that how that relationship between these different factors that may cause the chronic tension headache. Even my study also we conclude that marital status, that definitely the married person definitely have a lot of stress today, because a lot of commitment, a lot of work, because the professional is, or maybe the daily work is different than family responsibility. Even it's you can say that families are they're more, especially the female have more stress, but still the men also have stress in the work and come to the home. They may we have seen that study our conclude that they have great associations, more significant associations, I can say, pain severity and marital status. Same like pain severity is significantly associated with the duration since the illness onset, and also medications. Patients who are taking alone with analgesic or analgesic with like antipsychotic or the propranolol, that have the significant associations. Again, the occupation, this definitely nature of the work may different kind of stress will be maybe existing, so that the student free from stress, unskilled labor, and employed trade. So sometimes depending upon the stress level, also according to nature of the work, that also have great significantly associated with the headache frequency. Again, some of the other factors like residents, rural, semi-urban, definitely we can say that they have that is also significant in terms of the frequency of the headache is associated with the residents of the patients or populations. Again, systemic illness who are suffering with some of the systemic, they were that also associated with the headache, significant associated headache frequency. Again, medication also, like whatever I earlier mentioned, that patient with analgesic or again with other drugs, that also significantly associated with the headache frequency. This is the line of treatment today for acute management. Patient who are come with the first time they're reporting that they are with a headache, we ruled out that patient is a chronic tension type headache or maybe migraine, whatever I can say. But majorly I reporting here about the chronic tension headache. We start with a simple analgesic, depending upon how the patient respond to that. Patient is comfortable or free from pain, we may go into that second line of drug as a prophylactic drugs, like I already mentioned about. So first line like antipsychotic drugs, or we can go into the SRS, or maybe we can go with the like beta blockers. So again, the beta blocker also we can go with the starting dose and titrating the daily doses and targeting the dose according to the range. And if there is contraindication there due to asthma or maybe some other things, we may consider that patient may not be tolerate, or maybe we have to withhold it. So these all the overall, the second line and pharmacological management of the patient. Even we do anti-epileptic, that's also one of the second line of choice for the patient with the chronic tension. That all drugs are proven as evidence that this is reduce that pain, reduce the disability, and improve the quality of life in terms of that's what the overall outcome we achieved through all medications. And also they reduce the progress of the disease. That's the most important, because patients start with a frequency of very less frequency. They go with more frequency of the patient, and intensity of the headache is more. Again, also the duration of the headache, that all will be differentiated by one person to another person who are suffering with the chronic. That's all managed with these medications. Then again, under TCA, tricyclic antidepressants, amitriptyline, this is one of the drug of choice already mentioned, and again selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor and benzodiazepine. These all the muscle relaxant. I told this is mostly this problem. I can say that this is central sensitizations due to all triggering factors, stress, posture. I can say that whatever the anxiety or whatever the exposure or lifestyle changes which are due to that, whatever the exposure patient, even environment, this all centralizing that central sensation, that is the one cause muscle spasm that may be radiating into that from neck to the head, that only majorly causing this chronic tension drugs. So they always give that muscle relaxant as a drug of choice that maybe help the patient to relieve from the pain and also improve that quality of life of the patients. So far we discussed about pharmacological management that routinely they're doing. Today my objective of this presentation, how this non-pharmacological management, how helping the patient to, other than we cannot say we cannot stop the pharmacological management. Definitely it's already have evidences which you are doing routinely. So other than routine, how this including this progressive muscle relaxation.
5 minutes more, sir.
Yeah. So acupuncture and TENS and manual therapy, these are non-pharmacological management. How the patient is with adding this type of combo therapy, I can say, or holistic management to improve the patient. This is what PMR I introduced in my studies, which I one of the my experimental group, and everyone know about. This is one of the kind of exercise we do, contracting and relaxing the muscles to. It is not only reduce and deep breathing exercise, reduce the stress, also relax the patient, the muscles, all the muscles. Patient is already told the muscle construction also will be relaxed in the better manner. I developed the gain with the help of Dr. Chal and the other psychologist, and I trained also for that to given the patients. Finally, we show that result. You can see out of 169 in the experimental group, there are definitely significant reduction in the headache severity as compared with the control group in 4th week, 8th week, and 12th week. And it's all in terms of frequency, in terms of the severity, in terms of the duration also. This all the reduction we are able to see, and also disability also. That's what the outcome we want to improve that the patient's quality of life by reducing the disability. That also the improved in the significant improvement. Again, that sleep quality also improved in 4th week, 8th week, and 12th week. This is all the outcome we achieved through the PMR. So it's not, I'm concluding. I have so many studies I have gone through, doing my PhD work. I'd say already the evidence are there, other than pharmacological management, because due to side effect, it's definitely it's want the patient that they go into a gastric problem, or we can say that the patient definitely required other management that may prophylactically to to reduce the patient's headache and also improve the quality of. Everyone about the acupuncture TENS that also recently trended, and manual therapy like manipulations by physical therapists. So today the need of our nurses, nurse specialization coming up. They are the one to educate the patients. They are the one prescribe the medication in other countries. I hope India will come up due to the National Nursing Commission is coming up now. They may introduce that headache nurse specialist. I'm hoping that maybe in the coming conferences in future, we may have that nurse specialist in headache. They may have the very resourceful, and they may bring the better outcome of the patients other than what we do. So concluding that tension diabetic is one of the costliest neurological illness which proven to have repercussion in the patient quality of life, their family and social role. Patient with the CTTH experience moderate to high severity of the headache, along with the substantial duration and frequency, and was associated with various lifestyle related factor which can result is. I know it's a very lengthy presentation, but still a very short way I presented because it's one of my doctoral work that I want to address to the people who are doing in the great in the neuro area. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. And anybody have any doubt regarding this? Hope that all are clear. I think, sir. Thank you so much for your wonderful presentation, sir. Let's move on to the next speaker. Next speaker is Dr. Manju Tandavani, lecturer from College of Nursing, PGH, Chandigarh. Madam is going to present on acute management of patients with subarachnoid hemorrhage. Yes, yes.
Okay. So good evening to everyone. So first of all, I would like to thank Ms. Anjali and her team for inviting me and also accepting me this important topic of acute management of subarachnoid hemorrhage. I have personally experienced that a competent nursing care can improve the outcome of subarachnoid patients with subarachnoid hemorrhage, and our ignorance can definitely result harm to the patients. So aneurysmal subarachnoid hemorrhage is a medical emergency and it's a cause of significant morbidity and mortality. A quarter of the patients of SH dies and more than or nearly half of the patients die due to go with neurological deficits. To improve functional outcome, we need to do early aneurysm repair, aggressive management, and constant monitoring and competent care, where nurses have a great role. So let's see what is SAH. SAH is the occurrence of bleeding into the subarachnoid space, which you can see here, which is a space between arachnoid matter and the pia mater. Here you can very clearly see this is the epidural, which is outside the dura, and this is the subdural below the dura, while subarachnoid is in between pia mater and the arachnoid matter, which is even going into the each sulci and can result more damage to the brain. So this is how brain looks when a patient develops SH, angry and red, blushed brain. So the incidence of SH, like it's a small proportion of overall stroke, and 2 to 16 per 1 lakh is the incident rate, and it is high. The incidence is high in low to middle income countries. It increases with age, and the incidence is higher in women, as well as the incidence is more in blacks and Hispanics. The SH can be traumatic as well as spontaneous. Today, we are going to talk about spontaneous SH, that is mainly due to aneurysm or sometime due to AVM. So approximately 80% of the SH is due to ruptured intracranial aneurysm. We have even seen that a high homocysteine level in patients with SH. This is the cerebral aneurysm that you can see, and this is the arterial venous malformation, which is a abnormal network of the arteries and the veins in the brain. And classification, we know that there are various kinds of classification of aneurysm, but in cerebral aneurysm, majority of them are saccular aneurysm, which are the one causing SH. And this is how it looks when the aneurysm is there in the blood vessel. And this is how it looks when it ruptures. So the aneurysms can be located in various parts of the circular villus. This is on the A1 segment, ACOM, and it can be on the anterior cerebral artery. It can be there on the internal carotid artery, middle cerebral artery, or posterior circulation, which is posterior cerebral artery, or a posterior inferior cerebellar artery. So you can see, but that majority of the aneurysm is located in anterior circulation. That is ACOM, PCOM, and MCA. And based on this size, aneurysm can be classified into small, large, and giant, and supergiant. And what are the risk factors of developing cerebral aneurysms? Most of the time, we see that the cerebral aneurysm is seen in patients with hypertension because of the constant blood flow with a high blood pressure, high pressure within the arterial walls. Gradually, there will be thinning and there will be development of aneurysm. It will be more happening at the junctions of the arteries. And majority of the aneurysm, many of the patients are reported to have connective tissue disorders and also familial aneurysms. And it is also sometimes associated seen with polycystic kidney disease. So what are the risk factors of rupture? The age, more than 50 to 60 years, female gender, hypertension, diabetes mellitus, substance abuse like cigarette smoking, cocaine abuse, and alcohol consumption. And the size of as the size of this aneurysm increases, that also is a risk for rupture. But you can see that if the size of the aneurysm is more than 15 millimeter, risk of bleeding is less due to clot formation within the aneurysm sac. So what are the clinical manifestations? The clinical manifestations of the unruptured aneurysm shows mild headache, confusion, fainting, and vertigo. And this headache, which happens maybe 1 or 2 months or few weeks before the actual rupture, is known as sentinel headache. And when the aneurysm ruptures, that phase we call it as ictus. And this is the pathophysiology, what happens when an aneurysm ruptures. The patient can develop vasospasm due to the intrinsic coagulation pathway effect. Patient can develop mass effect due to the presence of blood, and patient can develop edema, and patient can develop hydrocephalus due to presence of blood in ventricles, and some part of the brain can act as epileptogenic foci. Patient can develop meningeal irritation because it happens in the meningeal layers. So mass effect and the hydrocephalus can increase the ICP and reduce the cerebral perfusion pressure and cerebral blood flow, and that can result in ischemia to the patient. It can further increase the cerebral edema and further increase the ICP. So the clinical manifestations of ruptured aneurysm include severe headache, vomiting, confusion, lethargy, coma, generalized seizures, manifestations of meningeal irritation, etc. Because we have seen all the pathophysiology, like most of them are the signs of increased ICP. And I told you that some part of the brain where the bleeding is there can act as epileptogenic foci. And there are various classifications of SH. This is based on the Glasgow Coma scale, which is known as WFNS scale, as the GCS reduces, or the GCS 15 is grade 1 and 3 to 6 is grade 5. And this is the Hunt and Hess classification based on symptoms of the SH, and this is the modified Fisher scale based on the amount of blood in the CT scan. So nowadays, mostly we use WFNS classification. But we also go by this one CT scan is obtained. This is, you can see here, you can show you here, this is a CT scan. This is the Fisher scale where you can see grade 1, there is no SH. In grade 2, there is thin SH, and grade 3, thick SH is there, which is more than 1 millimeter, and in grade 4, there is IVH. There is also a modified Fisher scale where there is grade 1, you can see thin SH, mild hyperdensity, you can see over here. And in grade 2, you can see thin SH with IVH, you can see the blood in the ventricles as well. And the grade 3, that is diffuse SH, thick SH, without IVH, and grade 4, you can see that there is thick SH with blood in the ventricles. So this is the WFNS classification, which I already told. We should also see what are the complications of SH, which are most common are rebleeding, increased ICP, vasospasm, hydrocephalus, seizures, and hyponatremia. So we can see that high adiposity and poor nutrition increases the risk of vasospasm in the patients with SH, as well as high triglyceride level increases the risk of vasospasm. So let us look at the emergency management principles. The principles of emergency management include airway breathing circulation, calcium channel blockers to prevent cerebral vasospasm, avoidance of hypovolemia and hypotension to maintain CPP, cerebral blood flow, pain management, osmotic diuretics, avoidance of Valsalva maneuver, no antiplatelet drugs, EVD and ICP monitoring, monitoring cerebral vasospasm and rebleeding, early securing of aneurysm, and maintaining euvolemia, hypertension, and following surgery. So this is a real challenge to achieve all these objectives of management in patients of SH due to various pathophysiology. The management goes like that. When the patient comes into emergency, we stabilize the ABC of the patients, and we start with phenytoin, we start with nimodipine if the patient is having really his clinical sign of SH, and we try to keep the BP lesser than 160 because there's a chance for rebleeding again, and then perform NCCT, that is a non-contrast CT scan of the brain, and then followed by CT angio to locate the brain, locate the aneurysm within the circle of Willis. And in CT scan, we also assess for hydrocephalus and need for the EV, external ventricular drainage. And we also see if the CT angiography is not clear and not localizing the aneurysm, or there is a diffuse SH, we go for cerebral angiography for further evaluation. So when the patient comes, we need to collect a proper history, do a proper physical examination, including all the neurological examination. You need to perform CT or MRI. MRI is better, but CT is good enough. If patient is having diffuse SH, we can go for an MRI. CT angiography to locate the aneurysm, DSA to again, if CT angiography is not clear, and LP is done when the patient is having typical features of SH, but CT is negative. This will say if there is any blood in the CSF. So you can see this is a CT scan, which is showing SH. Here you can see this is a CT angiography report, which is showing aneurysm. This is a cerebral DSA, or the cerebral angiography, that is showing the aneurysm. You know that CT angiography is done by administering a venous dose of radioactive substances, but in cerebral angiography, we need to administer through femoral artery. So this is another investigation, that is transcranial Doppler to assess the velocity of blood flow. We have various windows like temporal and submandibular, various windows, and usually we go for temporal window to assess the cerebral blood flow, and the velocity will be increased if there is the increased if the patient is having cerebral vasospasm. TCD is mainly done to assess the vasospasm, and nurses are trained in Western countries. We are also trying to incorporate that part in our institute. And once this is done and aneurysm is localized or the investigations are done, we shift the patient to IC for further management, where the nursing care is very important. Holistic nursing care is very important, but I won't be able to go into the details of the comprehensive care, but we will just focus what are the care which are needed for the patients of SAH. Maintain ABC. Once we admit in ICU, we need to constantly monitor the patient neurological and hemodynamic status. I told you that if the patient is going to rebleed, then the ICP will increase. We need to be able to identify any subtle change that is happening in relation to ICP, or if the patient is developing vasospasm, the patient will be developing focal neurological deficit, we should be able to identify that too. And coming to management of vasospasm, we give nimodipine 60 mg for hourly. And if there is intraarterial, intrathecal piperine, and they are not in practice much, nimodipine can be given orally or even intraarterial or even intravenous. Usually we go for orally because the effectiveness of all of this are found to be equal. Then cerebral blood flow have to be maintained by maintaining a proper or adequate or slightly more intake of the giving more IV fluids, and maintaining a slight lead towards high BP. And maintain BP 120 to 150 millimeter of Hg, that is systolic, and a high central venous pressure, so that the highly viscous blood can, because already vasospasm is there mild amount and the blood may be viscous. So if the viscous blood going through narrow vessels, the cerebral perfusion will be very less, and again there is reduced CPP. So to overcome all this, we need to make sure that we are maintaining adequate volemia and the BP on the slightly higher side. So to reduce the ICP, we need to elevate the head end of the pit. Osmotic diuretics, mannitol or hypertonic saline can be administered. CSF diversion can be done through EVD or draining the CSF. Hydrocephalus, if patient is having, we need to put EVD to drain CSF with blood. And hyponatremia is another complication that is associated with SH. Sodium supplementation or oral salt or hypertonic saline can be given to manage that. The patient, I told you that there's a very high chance of developing rebleeding. The only management of rebleeding is, to prevent rebleeding, is neurosurgical clipping and endovascular obliteration. Otherwise, patient is at risk for rebleeding at any time. So we can also provide aneurysm precautions, which you'll see. We have to give sedation, manage, like this all are part of aneurysm precautions. By keep the patient calm and stress-free, we need to provide sedation if necessary. If patient is very restless, analgesics, laxatives, and to reduce the stress ulcer, proton pump inhibitor, and if necessary, prophylactic antibiotics can be given. And these are the aneurysm precautions, includes dim light, limit visitors, decrease noise around, elevate the head end of the bed, avoid Valsalva maneuver, administer analgesics and sedatives, avoid exciting or upsetting the patient, emotionally, I mean. Then nutrition is very important. If the patient is alert, we can start with clear fluids. Otherwise, we can start with IV fluids and monitor serum electrolytes. And we need to prepare the patient for operation next day morning. Usually like head injury and other cases, we don't take the patients immediately to the operation once the aneurysm is located, because this is a complicated surgery where all the experts from the different fields are needed. So because we need get all this support during the daytime. So when the patient comes in the evening or in the night, the patients will be usually operated next day morning. They don't immediately take the patient to OT like a head injury or EDH or STH. Then we also need to do indwelling catheterization and avoid anticoagulants in these patients. As I told, coming to surgical management, usually we go for a TEONL approach of craniotomy. And this is the obliteration of the neck of the aneurysm. And after putting the clip, before that, they'll be putting a temporary clip to stop the blood flow to this area, just about proximal to the aneurysm, and after that they will put the clip on the neck of the aneurysm, rupture it and suck the blood out of it, and then remove the temporary clip. And the duration of temporary clip is very important. If the duration increases, that can result in global hypoxia. And this is coiling. where GDC coils, the platinum coils, multiple coils are inserted into the aneurysm so that the blood within this aneurysm gets clotted. So there are various factors favoring the early surgery. That is like good medical condition of the patient. If the patient is hemodynamically stable, neurological condition is grade is lesser than 3. Anyway, whatever grade it is patient is having, we need to clip the aneurysm. That's very important. If the grade 4 or 5, we may not clip at times because patient will be already in a moribund condition. And most of the time, there is no outcome if we do clipping also. So indications of imminent vasospasm or rebleeding, and a large clot, early rebleeding. In this case, we can do the surgery early if there is a risk of early rebleeding. And factors favoring delayed surgery include poor medical condition of the patient, poor neurological condition, that is SH grade
5 minutes more, ma'am.
Yeah, sure. Difficulty in clipping if the size is very large, significant cerebral edema, and significant vasospasm. So factors predicting the outcome of the patient: grade of SH, that's high grade of the SH have poor outcome, age, hypertension, pre-existing medical condition, presence of vasospasm, rebleeding, etc. So prognosis: acute mortality before clipping can be 30 to 50%, and 30 to 60% of successful clipping never return to the pre-morbid states. You can see a very high number of the patients go with morbidity, and so you can know that the nurse's role are not only is going to be there in emergency, it's going to continue. We don't have time to discuss them. Then unclipped aneurysm have a overall mortality that is very high, that is 45%, and by 1 year, 63%. And morbidity, I told you already that 30 to 60%. So to assess the outcome of the patient during follow-up, we can use modified dragging scale. We can use Glasgow outcome scale. As neuronurses, you should be familiar with the scales. So if you look at the definitive management pathway of SH patients, so first is emergency. As I told you, pre-hospital management, usually not much time will be there because patients usually feel very severe headache and immediately rush to the emergency room, where we, after the airway emergency room management, the stabilizing the patient, we get the AB imaging done, CT scan, cerebral angiography done, and after that the patient is shifted to neuro ICU, and then patients get operated. And after operation, again the management, nursing management is very, very important in maintaining BP and maintaining a good cerebral blood flow and reducing the ICP. So after that, patient moves to progressive patient care and rehabilitation and home care. So what are the mandatory nursing competencies which are required to manage patients of SH? That they include critical care nursing competency, neurological examination skill, because critical care nursing competency include the complete nursing, care of a patient in ICU. Other than that, the nurse should be able to do neurological examination, especially should be able to identify increased ICP, rebleeding, vasospasm. So should be able to assess GCS, pupillary reaction, muscle strength, because to identify rebleeding and focal deficits, and ICP monitoring skill, and care of EVD, because many patients can be on EVD, should be able to perform and interpret transcranial Doppler, and post-operative care of clipping and coiling, I told you, which are quite challenging, which we cannot discuss over here. And then patient and caregiver counseling. I told you that a lot of comorbidity patients are having, morbidity patients will be having, caregivers will be having a lot of burden. So we need to counsel them. So some of the challenges that we usually face in the management of SH include: we need to prevent rebleeding. I told you that the patient comes to ICU emergency, and since that time till the patient is getting operated, that is the clipping or a coiling, whichever it is really challenging to prevent rebleeding, because once the patient rebleeds, the mortality is very, very high. And preventing vasospasm is another challenge. For that, the BP has to be maintained, maybe by IV fluids or by vasopressors or adrenaline we need to provide, and we need to maintain a high BP to overcome the already increased ICP. So again, this is another challenging area. And then post-operative nursing care, because that these patients would be very restless and a lot of risk of developing various complications. So altogether, it is going to be challenging. So to conclude, all patients of high suspicion of SH must be investigated for SH. Like example, like thunderclash headache or severe headache, or when they report that worst headache in my life. Early treatment of ruptured aneurysm is strongly recommended. Otherwise, morbidity will be high or mortality will be high. We need to take all the measures to prevent all the complications that patient can develop, which we have already seen. And competent nurses are integral part of SAH management to improve outcome. So I hope whatever we have discussed will be useful for the management of emergency of patients of SAH in emergency condition for all those who attended today's session. Thank you so much. If any questions are there, we can take.
Thank you, Manju.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for your deep and excellent presentation.
Thank you.
It's very important for the critical care nurses for their everyday practices, isn't it?
Yeah,
Anybody
yeah.
have any doubt, please, you can. Any questions from the audience side, from the attendees?